Okay, tonight we're going to start our new unit, Unit 2, with the discussion of Islam. So Islam is our last major world religion that we're going to discuss. So Islam arose on the Arabian Peninsula. If you take a look at the map, you can see the Red Sea, and that leads to Egypt. And so that Arabian Peninsula today is Saudi Arabia, and it's part of the Middle East. You can see with the arrows, we have two locations that are going to be important. The first is Mecca, which is the birthplace of Muhammad. It's also the most important religious city in the Islamic religion, so it'd sort of be like the equivalent of Bethlehem or Jerusalem for Christians. And so that city of Mecca. And then the other city we're going to refer to is 20 miles north of Mecca, and it's called Medina. And this is where Muhammad fled to for his life in 622 CE. So remember these cities as we discuss Islam in the start. So the Arabian Peninsula, again, there's another map. You can see it's mostly desert on the map at the right. There's some scattered oases, which, though you guys didn't read The Alchemist, an oasis is an area in the desert that for some geographical reason has water. And so it's a supplier of water and fertile, and trees and plants can grow around it, and so it's kind of like a safe haven in the desert. The Arabian Peninsula was home to many clans of Arabs, so that means families and groups of Arabs. And one key group of Arabs are the nomadic camelback traders, and they are known as the Bedouins. And the Bedouins tend to fight over the grazing land that's very scarce. The grazing land for animals to eat is only available at the oasis. And so you have a lot of conflict over geography that occurs. Some background. This is during the time of Muhammad. So the city of Mecca, which again is that more southern city, was a major trade center because it was a crossroad of two caravan routes. So the Silk Road would travel down the Arabian Peninsula to the connection with Egypt, and then even more south to the town of Aden. And so these trade routes met at Mecca and crossed. And that is how Mecca was connected to Mesopotamia, to East Africa, and to the Mediterranean Sea by trade. So there were a lot of people traveling through Mecca. Arabs also traveled to Mecca for religious purposes, to pray at the Kaaba, which is a religious shrine you read about, and it was believed to be built by Abraham. And so people would take the trip and travel to the Kaaba to pray to the key god, the local gods and goddesses. So there's a picture of the Kaaba. I strongly suggest on your iPad you use Google Earth to look at the Kaaba, and you can zoom in and click on certain areas of Mecca and check it out. They'll give you a rundown and historical background on all these regions. So the Kaaba, this is the shrine. It's made out of marble, and you can see all the people making the Hajj and praying around the Kaaba. They rotate in circles along with the song as they pray. So the Prophet Muhammad, here is Muhammad being greeted by the angel Gabriel. He was in a cave. And Muhammad was a wealthy merchant in Mecca. And he was troubled by the polytheistic idol worship and problems of Arab society with all the fighting of the Bedouins, etc. And so he went to look for meaning into the mountains nearby Mecca. So he was in a cave, and he received a message from the angel Gabriel, is how the story goes. And it called Muhammad to be the messenger of God, the one true God. And it said that it was Muhammad's job to spread the word. And so Muhammad went back to Mecca and urged Arabs to give up their idol worship and to submit to the one God that Angel Gabriel told him to be the messenger for. And so Islam means submission, the word itself. And it's the idea to submit to the one true God. So after Muhammad is told by the angel Gabriel that he is chosen to be the one to spread the word of Islam and the voice of the one true God, Allah, Muhammad starts his journey, his mission, and initially he has very few followers. They consist of his wife, his servants, and some of his neighbors, his friends, etc. One of the reasons that it's so hard for Muhammad's message to catch on is that the merchants in Mecca are very resistant to Muhammad's message. They do not want Arabs to start rejecting their many polytheistic gods, because that is what leads them to go to Mecca and worship at the Kaaba. And it was really important to the merchants that Arabs in the area kept going to Mecca, traveling to Mecca, and worshiping at the Kaaba. Brainstorm why you think this might be so important to merchants, to want travelers to come into their city and visit, etc. And so these merchants are very wealthy and powerful, and as a result they threaten Muhammad's life, and Muhammad has to flee to that city Medina that's 20 miles north. You can see it on the map. And this journey is known in the Quran as the Hijra, and it means the flight. It's Muhammad's flight to Medina. So you can take a look at the map and see the fleeing of Muslims and Muhammad fleeing in 622 AD. I also would like you to notice the cities with major Jewish presence around the area and cities with major Christian presence around the area. This is going to become very important when we talk about the teachings and the beliefs of Islam. So the teachings of Islam, first, it is monotheistic, again, because the angel Gabriel came to Muhammad and said to believe in the one true God. And in Islam, this God is called Allah, but that's because it's the Arabic name for God. Allah is the same God that Christians worship and the same God that Jews worship. Muslims follow the teachings in the Quran. So the Quran is the holy book of Islam. It's akin to the Torah or the Bible. One clarification is that the religion is called Islam, and those people who practice the religion are called Muslims. And so when you're talking about people who practice Islam, they should not be called Islams. They should be called Muslim. So please work on making that distinction. As far as the afterlife, Muslims believe that they will be judged by God and receive either eternal punishment in hell or eternal bliss in paradise. This should sound very familiar to other religions we've studied. Think about reasons why that might be. So more teachings of Islam. The key tenets of Islam are called the 5 pillars, and they're the 5 basic duties accepted by all Muslims that you had to complete in order to get that eternal bliss in paradise. The first of the 5 pillars is that you must confess your faith to the one true God, and so you could not worship other gods. So that's called the confession of faith. The second tenet of Islam is prayer. And Muslims need to pray 5 times a day in the direction of Mecca. So if you ever visit a city that is almost entirely Muslim, there's from all of the towers, this call to prayer is called out 5 times a day, and everyone stops what they're doing. They oftentimes will go and collect and carry with them rugs and take out their rugs facing Mecca and complete their prayer with the call to prayer. Sometimes they will say the prayer aloud, but other times there's a song and they will pray to this song. If you remind me in class, I will play the song for you. The third tenet is to fast. And so the months of Ramadan, fasting means, just for clarification, not eating. And so during the months of Ramadan, from sunrise to sunset, Muslims do not eat solid food, and they're not supposed to drink water, although more liberal modifications of that today are that they can drink water. And then it's after sundown in Muslim cities. They're in the town square and in any social public areas. There are picnic tables set up, and there's a huge feast every night once the sun is set. And so those are the months of Ramadan. The fourth tenet is zakat, which means you have to give a certain percentage of your income to charity. So it's important to the Muslims to give to charity and be generous. The fifth and final tenet is called the Hajj, and the Hajj means a pilgrimage, which is a religious journey to Mecca. So every Muslim throughout their lifetime is expected to make the Hajj, or a religious trip to Mecca, and go and pray in front of the Kaaba. And so there's a time of year that is called the Hajj, when the majority of Muslims would make this trip, but there's other times, and you could go any time of year, but it's during the Hajj that the majority of Muslims go, and you don't have to go yearly, but one time in your life. So these are the 5 pillars. So here you see a picture of the Hajj, and this gentleman here is the one doing the call to prayer over a loudspeaker, and so he's singing, and everyone is praying on their rugs and rotating around the Kaaba. So before Islam, the Kaaba was believed it had the shrines and statues of the many polytheistic gods, and we'll get to this, but when Muhammad returns to Mecca after his fleeing to Medina, he comes with an army and destroys and smashes all the statues that are in the Kaaba and says it is for the one true God. Okay, so you should use your iPad, and if you were to Google Boston Big Picture Hajj, and there's a picture interactive descriptions, and you can look at the Hajj and the different parts and elements of the Hajj, because it's a multiple day trip. They make a journey a mile away, and you can learn about that. And think about what might have been different during Muhammad's time and what might have been the same. So the Quran. The Quran is the religious text of Muslims, and it teaches about God and provides a guide to life. So much like the Bible, what is right and what is wrong. And it's usually through stories. The Quran emphasizes generosity, honesty, and social justice. This is very similar to Judaism and Christianity. Think about the 10 Commandments, etc. The Quran has as well, and we'll go to this in the next book, but it has something called the Sharia, which is a book of law. So Muslim law is in their religious text. Whereas we have our governments make the laws. In Islam, many governments like Iran and Iraq, etc., are called theocracies, and they follow the Sharia as their law. And so in the Sharia, which is in the Quran, it's like a book of the Quran, there are many harsh punishments for crimes. So you were meant to keep in order and follow the rules. And the Quran is written in Arabic, and it is blasphemy to translate it. So that means offensive to Allah. So all converts need to learn to read the Quran. And this is similar to Hebrew and the Torah, where there are many Jewish people who do not speak Hebrew, but they can read it enough to understand the Torah. So Arabic is actually in the top 3 languages spoken in the world, but not the top 3 spoken for conversation and for practicality, but it's in the top 3 spoken by number of people, where many people can read Arabic, only that's in the Quran, and they wouldn't be able to necessarily hold a conversation. Next, I forgot to mention in the last slide that if you look back, you can see the Arabic writing in the text of the Quran, and just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So people of the book, since Muslims believe in the same God as Christians and Jews, to some extent they respect Christians and Jews. So if you look at the geography from our few slides back, Muhammad was definitely familiar with Christianity and Judaism, and that is why there are so many similarities. So Muslims believe that Islam is the final and complete revelation of God, and that the Torah and the Bible are only partial revelations. So the Quran contains the 10 Commandments, it contains many of the pieces of the Torah and the Bible, and then additional books and additional revelations. So the Muslims believe that they have the final and complete revelation, and that Torah and the Bible are unfinished works. Again, remember that Muhammad lived in 600 CE. So this is over 600 years after Jesus. And that's about 2,500 years after Judaism with Abraham. So it is afterwards and very aware that they're after, and so they believe that they're the final revelation. So Christians and Jews become referred to as people of the book because they share the same text or part of it as Muslims. And so they're morally superior to the polytheistic people of the Middle East and the Bedouins, etc., because they do believe in the Torah and the Bible and the First Testament and the Ten Commandments, but they're not quite as good as Muslims. So in early Muslim societies and empires, Christians and Jews were allowed to practice religious freedom because they were people of the book. So now we go on to the Sharia, which again is that Islamic system of law, and it is a book of the Quran. So it would be like Genesis or Leviathan in the Bible or the Torah. And so the Sharia regulates moral conduct, family life, business practices, and government. So the Sharia is all-encompassing. It says how people should act within their family as well as in society. And so this results in no separation between religious matters and the law. So we have a lot of Islamic empires and today Islamic countries that are a theocracy, meaning their government is also Muslim and there's no separation between church and state like we have in the United States. They've practiced the Sharia. That is their code of law. They don't have a constitution per se. So your exit slip is some blasphemy. This is a translation of the Quran. Go ahead and read it and think of, so the Quran is written by God, but it was Muhammad, and he said he was speaking the words that God told him or Allah told him. And so you can read here some ideas that are presented in the Quran in the final revelations. Please be ready with questions for tomorrow, things you're unsure about, or possible discussion questions. Have a great night.